welcome back to another episode of All Out Nevada, your go-to podcast for insightful glimpses into the Nevada judiciary. I'm your host, Seth Easley, and today we have a particularly impactful episode for you. I'm honored to be joined by Chief Judge Cynthia Leung of the Las Vegas Municipal Court, Department 1. Thank you very much for joining us, Chief Judge.
Thanks for having me, Seth.
So Chief Judge Leung is here to discuss an incredibly important and transformative program, the Women in Need of Change Court, also known as WIN Court. So without further ado, let's get started. So Chief Judge, could you just provide an overview of WIN Court and its primary goals?
Sure. WIN Court is a trauma-informed and gender-specific specialty drug court program. And what that means in general is that we help women who are constantly in and out of the system, multiple arrests. This is adult criminal misdemeanor court. And they present with multiple arrests, and we're trying to get to the underlying issues and causes as to why we keep seeing the same women over and over again. And so to that end, WIN Court is designed to look at those root issues, which, as we've discovered over the years, is trauma. So there is a kind of complicated process in which we address the trauma, any co-occurring mental health issues, along with life skills, education. The idea is to help these women rediscover their self-value and their self-worth in the process of learning why they should not be committing crimes, what they can be doing differently in their lives, and providing those opportunities to show them a completely different path than they've experienced before.
Okay, so before we start, I do have some follow-up questions regarding addressing trauma and co-occurring issues. So how are participants identified and referred to the program? What are key criteria?
Well, typically what happens is the attorneys, the public attorneys or private attorneys and the prosecutors will have identified someone that presents with potentially a need for a specialized court program. With respect to the women, there is usually a history of prostitution in their record, multiple arrests with regarding drug use or substance use disorder. We are not, for grant reasons, we don't allow women in that have a history of violence or violent behavior, but everything is kind of looked at on a case-by-case situation, and the therapist that is the coordinator for my program will do a clinical assessment, but it's the arrests, the cases, the attorneys that generally will identify someone who might be an appropriate candidate. I also get referrals from other judges within my own jurisdiction, someone that comes through their courtroom that looks like they might be in need of some additional level of assistance. And also in Nevada, we will accept ladies from other jurisdictions entirely, justice court, district court. So we are flexible in that. But it's usually the attorneys that have identified someone who might be in need of a specialized program.
That's really cool. That's interesting. I didn't know you would take participants from other jurisdictions.
Yes, we have some amazing resources in Clark County and in the city of Las Vegas. And recognizing that, I have taken, for example, some participants from Henderson Municipal Court, and we've been successful in doing that. But this program all really does revolve around the individual participant and their willingness to engage in these changes and in different behavior. But the legislature has allowed us to accept these transfers, and I think that has really helped our community.
I mean, yeah, I bet. I can only imagine. So WIN Court is described as a trauma-responsive court. So what exactly does that mean, and how is that approach implemented into the program?
Well, in the course of running this program, and I've done this since I became a judge in 2008, we realized, and by we, I mean my team, the coordinator who is a therapist, and all of the different partners that we work with in the community, we realized that trauma is not a one-size-fits-all scenario. A participant may come in and recently have experienced some kind of horrific trauma. 100% of the women that come into the program have some type of trauma. And what that looks like is anything from severe neglect and abuse when they were children, sexual assault. It runs the gamut of what could happen while you're living on the street, because most of the women do present as unhoused when they come into the program. So the trauma is individual to the participant as to how it manifests itself. Sometimes it's very early on and they are in some immediate crisis, and we will try to help them get stabilized. That's one of the things we initially really try to do with someone coming into the program. Other times it takes many, many months for the issue to arise at a level at which the participant is able to talk about it and delve into it. So we don't force that part of the treatment. It arises when it naturally arises, and it will, because we're getting them stabilized and getting them used to, sobriety, and also creating an environment of safety and non-judgment so that the women know, we're really not interested in all the terrible, horrible things that you've done. I know they have a criminal history. That's why they're in front of me. The issue is, how did you get here? What is going on with you right now that you've landed in this place at, in front of the court where you are seeking this level of assistance, because it's really their rock bottom. So how we address the trauma is through counseling, through specific counseling that's targeted to kind of what might be going on for them and how it manifests itself. So it's individualized, and we have many different community partners that we work with. Some might address an eating disorder, others might be able to perform certain types of techniques to address the trauma one way versus another way. Sometimes it's talk therapy, sometimes it's techniques like EMDR. And we just try to connect them to the best fit in the community that is available, but it's not cookie cutter. So it might become relevant 6 months in, it might be very relevant 3 months in, but 100% of the time, the women have experienced some kind of trauma that is absolutely affecting their decision, their substance use, and, their ability to try to have a normal, quote unquote, normal life. Trauma presents itself in a strange way. And I think that's one of the things that in WIN Court, we really strive to understand the end result of this behavior. It's easy to say, well, this behavior is wrong, and so you need to stop doing that, and you're going to get in trouble for that. It's their understanding of what accountability looks like and their understanding why they do the things that they do that WIN Court really tries to help them understand. And that's my sort of layperson, not being a counselor or a psychiatrist, but that's how I look at what we're doing and how trauma, is interwoven in the program.
Okay, so you also mentioned co-occurring mental health issues. How does that play a role in these behaviors?
Right. So a lot of times the women present with a lot of anxiety and depression. And when they are not masking that with drugs and alcohol and other types of behavior or risky, behavior, a lot of times they will be meeting with a psychiatrist and maybe getting medication to stabilize them. And usually it's depression and anxiety. There are other programs that we have for people who have more severe mental illness that is primary as opposed to substance use. And so it does get a little bit tricky because all of these things are kind of woven in together in the beginning. You have depression, anxiety, you have the trauma, and you have the substance use disorder. So in the beginning, we're just trying to stabilize, have a period of sobriety, help this individual's brain start to heal a little bit. And then a lot of times certain things will uncover or surface later. Some things present as more of a substance use disorder induced mental health issue, but we treat it with medication, we treat it with therapy.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So if I remember correctly, based off of what I read, the program requires an 18 to 24 month commitment.
Yes, that's correct.
So can you walk us through a little bit of what this commitment entails for participants? So they have treatment programs, counseling. Are there any other requirements?
Absolutely. I mean, the main sort of overview aspect of this is that I want them to be actively participating in their recovery. And there are definitely different phases that are part of the structure of Win Court. In the beginning, they're just sort of getting used to having a stable situation, realizing that this is a place of security and trust and not judgment. And I think when you're working with someone with trauma, that is a huge initial important aspect of it. The reason that it's 18 months long is because we learned that it takes a certain amount of time for the trauma really to be uncovered and to be able to effectively be addressed. So different people present with different needs. If they don't have their high school diploma, we are going to focus on their education and helping them, get their high school diploma or a GED. Some come in and have a little bit of job skills. Many have none. So after a period of sobriety and working their program, meaning that they are learning and understanding their disease of addiction, we will introduce an aspect of life skills and job training. We have many amazing community partners out there that I will send the Win Court ladies to, maybe a few months in for education and job training. And then ideally towards the end, living independently, what that looks like, that might mean being reconnected with family, and family is willing now to assist them in having a stable place to live. Well, we will help them get connected to resources so that they can learn and live independently, depending upon, what that might look like. I've had some women, they run the gamut. I've had some women who have gone to college and, further are working on a master's degree. I've had some that learn a trade, such as welding. And I've had others that have learned to better educate themselves so that they can navigate their prescriptions, their life, the shopping, just regular everyday activities that we take for granted that they may have never actually done because they have spent their entire life, on the street. So within an 18 to 24 month span, and it's 24 months because, technically a misdemeanor is, I have jurisdiction over misdemeanors for 2 years. But in that time span, that individual, goes through a period of understanding what their needs are and what does living independently and self-sufficiently look like for them. It's different for different women, but they all have to actively be participating in that, working a 12-step program and, but following the rules of whatever sober living facility that they might be in. Most of the time, the women start out in an extremely structured situation for the first few months. They may be in a facility like West Care or We Care where there's rules, and typically they are inpatient. And then from that standpoint, we will put them in a less restrictive living situation, a sober living, model. And then ideally at the end, when they're ready to graduate, they're living independently and, they have a job to sustain themselves. So it's a long process, but I feel that that's what it takes if you are going to invest in an individual, then you have to do it the right way, or, you do more harm if you don't do it the correct way, at least in my opinion. So.
Right, absolutely. You want to make sure you're taking the time to make sure to really, they have the opportunity to learn those lessons.
Yes.
So you've mentioned earlier a little bit about letting them know they're supported participants. So how does the programs, how do they balance accountability with support? And what are the consequences if someone doesn't meet requirements?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think you're almost teaching this individual how to reparent themselves, to kind of give a little perspective when I say most of the women, all of the women have had trauma, I mean, a lot of them have experienced really horrific things as children. And so when you grow up in an atmosphere where there is, no sense of nurturing and your sense of self-worth is tied to, what can you do for me? This is what you're going to do as a child, or this is what you're going to do for this person. And this is the years and years of prostitution and trafficking that you've been engaged with. There is a complete loss of identity and self-worth. And so accountability is a balance of helping this individual understand what self-worth means and why it's important to have a moral compass. I mean, if you value yourself, is this how you would behave? If you value your sobriety and the things that you've learned, your job skills, would you treat this person this way because this is not how you would like to be treated? So in the beginning with drug courts, there was a different kind of model, which was probably a little bit more punitive. Now we've learned that, if you relapse, you're not going to go to jail. You have a disease, and we need to approach it from the standpoint of understanding what is it that led you to this relapse and how do we address that before it happens. There are certain behaviors that are not tolerated. Of course, committing another crime, anything of violence or anything of threats. And it's a balance between an appropriate therapeutic response to that situation and why that person is doing whatever it is that they're doing. A lot of times with a relapse, we're going to redirect the treatment plan. And that's where I rely on the counselors and the psychiatrists to provide that to the team as, this is what we think is appropriate or not. At the end of the day, it is the judge's decision, but it would be so much easier if I could just cookie cut the thing and say, if you do this, 3 strikes, you're out. It's not. It's a lot more nuanced. So there may be any number of types of what we would call sanctions for accountability, including house arrest. It can include contempt time. It can include more therapy, more meetings. It can include a change in the therapy that they're currently doing, a treatment plan. So it kind of arises as to what is going on, with that person. And a lot of times they need to understand that it is okay to make a mistake. I think I say that quite a bit in court. It's okay for you to make a mistake because you need to learn that there is a logical explanation and an accountability for why this action is going to lead to this consequence. So pretty much in any kind of situation, there's an opportunity. I look at it as an opportunity for reinforcing that consequence of whatever behavior it is that's going on. And in this state of sobriety, I feel that the participants have a better understanding of the relationship between that. So you're not having a judge or a legal system that just can say, you did this, so therefore you're wrong, therefore you're going to go to jail. Or you're, we don't care about the why. We only care that you did this. We are all about the why, because you aren't going to get somebody to change their behavior unless they themselves understand the why of what's going on, underneath. So it's individualized in how we balance it, but, my team is pretty creative. We will come up with any number of sanctions to address the behavior, but primarily I want the participant to learn something about themselves, from it. That's the value. And then the accountability follows because they've learned something, important about themselves, hopefully.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this episode of I'll Allow It Nevada. We're always striving to bring you valuable insights and education, not just for judicial officers, but for anyone interested in the Nevada judiciary. If you find our content helpful or intriguing, please share your experience with your friends, family, and colleagues. Your support helps us reach a broader audience and ensures that more people can benefit from our discussions. Thank you for listening and supporting I'll Allow It Nevada. So how does WinCourt measure success? What are some indicators that participants are on that path to recovery and ultimately independence?
Well, I think while they're in the program, comparing, maybe the behavior and the attitude that they presented with and the kind of transformation at graduation, it is the words themselves as to how they speak about themselves, about their experience, about what they've learned. And so when I hear the feedback from a participant that, in fact, they understand why their structure, they understand why they are allowed to do certain things at certain times and not at other times. Like, for example, you would think that, oh, you know what, let's get a job as soon as possible. You need to start taking care of this, and that. Doing too many things too quickly is a good recipe for failure that, can be demoralizing. And so certainly there are objective milestones. I've had some women go to college. They are gainfully employed, whether that's in a career path or in a steady job. They are paying for their own, apartment. They've been reunited with family members, being reunited with their children. And for some that have the severe trauma, understanding and being able to work through that so that it isn't debilitating in their day-to-day, and, they're able to function and have learned basic life skills, how to take care of themselves, maybe how to reintroduce their children back to them, being able to utilize the court system to do those things. It's like when they come into the program, their life is stopped at whatever, point that it did. A lot of it has to do with the trauma. And so they're trying to pick up the pieces, from that point. So success for one person can mean that, they haven't spoken to their family for 5 or 6 years, and that they've been reconnected, that they were able to finish their GED and get a job or go on to further, education. So, success, it looks different for different people. One woman, a graduate that I had quite a few years ago, I would describe her ability, as maybe at a 5th grade reading level. And she did not, in fact, get her GED. But what she did learn was to put herself in a better position of being able to read things in the world, like her medication, like, navigating streets, the bus system. And, for her, she was also someone who had discovered that she was HIV positive while in the program. She discovered that. So there's another aspect to this, which is their actual physical health that we try to address with them as well. But so success for her is, living on her own and being able to navigate her world and the things that she needed to have in her day-to-day. It did not mean going to college, and having a regular 9-to-5 job.
So with the goal of the program, part of it being participants being able to be independent and self-sufficient, are there any follow-up services or continued support offered to participants once they've graduated?
Yes, they know as individuals that they can always contact the court and our court coordinator, Stephanie Maplethorpe, and they can always reach back. We would always assist them in getting reconnected to other community partners. Some of our community partners will provide wraparound services. Certainly, WestCare will provide continued assistance after they've graduated. Other nonprofit organizations like Unshakable and Hope for Prisoners and things like that, they are, also always available. So we don't do this on our own. The different community partners that we have are amazing, and they also will provide additional longer-term services after the ladies have graduated from the court program.
So this approach, have you found, How effective has it been in reducing recidivism among participants?
Well, we do track criminal history after they've graduated. I have some statistics over a 3-year period. I think the analysis was from 2015 to 2019. Wayne Court has about a 26% recidivism rate, which I think is pretty good. And, we do track that so that we can evaluate is what we are doing working, or not working. And what I found just anecdotally is that it is the element of the relapse, the substance use disorder that, is kind of what takes them out, after they've graduated. And that's why one of the really important components of the program is that they learn to establish a recovery community for themselves. And, when you were asking me earlier about all, different aspects of the program, there's so many parts to it. One of the most important things, though, in their independence is that they understand there is a recovery community that they have to create for themselves, that we will help them do that. But that is what's going to propel them long term, in staying in recovery.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up this conversation, I'm just curious, are there any plans for Wayne Court? Are there any challenges that Wayne Court's currently facing that you're having to deal with currently?
I think we're unusually blessed in that I'm in a jurisdiction and have a funding body in our city council that understands what we try to do in municipal court. And we have approximately 8 types of programs, that address different aspects of the community that might need another level of service. So right now, I've been able to balance the resources with the participants because by definition, it's difficult to have many, many people in a program like this. So because it's sort of naturally a little bit of a smaller program, but very intense, we've been able to, maximize those resources that we have. But the city of Las Vegas and Clark County have some amazing resources that, we've been able to tap into. So the future is that I hope that we are going to, continue to serve this population and the community. I think when you help heal one person, particularly a woman who is a mother and someone's daughter, you have this rippling effect in the community that with this type of program, you can break a cycle. You can break a cycle of criminal behavior and, substance use and trauma. So the future is that I foresee a healthy, continuation of the program. And because the way that we've designed it, being smaller, I think we'll still be around and serving the community.
The impact of Wayne Court is obvious, and I'm sure there's many lessons to be learned from it. What lessons, though, can other jurisdictions get from this program?
I think that the interesting thing and the different thing about a program like this is that it can translate into your regular everyday docket. Having compassion and understanding why somebody might be standing in front of you can go a long way. Yes, it is appropriate that people are accountable for their actions. But when you see so many people being arrested for the same thing over and over and over again, because that's how Wayne Court was born. It was born out of a desire to understand why the same people keep getting arrested over and over again. You begin to understand that simply incarcerating somebody may or may not achieve the end result that you want, which is public safety, accountability, and you want folks to stop committing these, types of crimes. So to the extent that you take a moment to invest in that individual and understand maybe how they got there might make a difference. Not everybody is a candidate for a specialty court program. This is specifically for a type of person that is ready for change and is not someone who is primarily criminogenic, who uses or abuses substances. It's someone who is presenting themselves that they, if given different choices, would choose different choices rather than criminal behavior.
I like that. I think that's a great thing for our audience to take away. So finally, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up this discussion?
I think that the one thing I would add is that this program was a collaborative process. It started out as a partnership between the Metropolitan Police Department and Las Vegas Municipal Court. It started as a pilot program, and at that time, the head of our alternative sentencing and education department, Beverly Goldston, came up with this concept of, well, maybe we should take a therapeutic approach to these folks that we just have a revolving door. And, I would like to leave your listeners with the idea that there can be innovation when done with the appropriate understanding about public safety and accountability as part of the mix. There is room in the criminal justice system for innovation and change. And that's how this program started. And I think it's important to stress that it was the Metropolitan Police Department, as well as a counseling division in the court system, that wanted to work together to address this issue. That's how WinCourt was born.
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you very much for joining us, Chief Judge Leung. I very much enjoyed learning about your program, and I'm very glad that more people are going to be able to hear about the amazing work you and your program are doing.
Thank you, Seth. I really appreciate you having me.
A heartfelt appreciation to our guest and to everyone who has tuned into this podcast. Before we wrap up, here are a couple of quick important reminders. For continuing legal education credit, be sure to complete a certificate of attendance and email it to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, or comments, we welcome your input. Please email them to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. We value and look forward to hearing from our listeners. Stay tuned for more episodes of I'll Allow It Nevada, released bi-monthly. This is Seth Easley signing off. Take care, Nevada.